Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
On this 15th day of December 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text number 35 on page 221. Yagngatva napunarmoham evam yasasi pandava yena bhutyan nisheshani drakshasyatman yato mahi yagyatva napunarmoham evam yasasi pandava yena bhutyan nisheshani drakshasyatman yato mahi yadgyatva napunarmoham evam yasasi pandava yena bhutan yasheshani drakshasyatman yato mahi yadgyatva napunarmoham evam yasasi pandava yena bhutan yasheshani drakshasyatman yato mahi yadgyatva napunarmoham evam yasasi pandava yena bhutan yasheshani drakshasyatman yato mahi. Yat which yatva knowing, na never, punaha again, moham to illusion, evam like this, yasasi you shall go, Pandava, O son of Pandu, yena by which bhutani living entities, asheshani all, drakshasi you will see, atmani in the supreme soul, ata u, or in other words, mayi in me. Translation. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. Purport. The result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Ma, not, ya, this. Some think that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a great historical personality, or that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its own original identity. But the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that absolute means that 1 plus 1 is equal to 1, and that 1 minus 1 is also equal to 1. This is the case in the absolute world. For one of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless not different from him. The bodily difference of the living entities is Maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By Maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted toward this end, that a living being, as Krishna's eternal servitor, cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being and identity apart from Krishna is called Maya. The living entities, as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme, have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies, as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter for all living entities. And giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves to have a separate identity. Thus, under different standards of material identity, they become forgetful of Krishna. When, however, such deluded living entities become situated in Krishna consciousness, it is to be understood that they are on the path of liberation, as confirmed in the Bhagavatam 2.10.6. Muktir hitmanyata rupam swarupena vivastitihi. Liberation means to be situated in one's constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. Om jnana timurandasya jnanandana salakaya chakshur unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, Krishna has gone through explaining different kinds of sacrifices. You remember there was the sacrifice of the outgoing breath into the ingoing, and there was sacrifices of the brahmacharis, sacrificing the sense activities, and all these different kinds of sacrifices. But then he explains that the best goal of the sacrifice is knowledge. The sacrifice can be performed, as we know, for going to the heavenly planets, or just a mundane sacrifice. A man sacrifices his time and his energy in order to get money to support his children and maintain a household. That's also sacrifice. But the best motive and the best goal of the sacrifice is this transcendental knowledge. Upadekshanti te jnanam. When you surrender to a bona fide spiritual master, and you remember the formula, who remembers those three things that are necessary? What is it? No. There's three: pranipatena, pariprashnena, and sevaya. Pranipatena is this surrender. This is text 34. Pariprashnena, inquiry. You have to ask questions. You notice that in all of our literature, there's a lot of conversations going on. That's because they're following this model. And then service. Those three things: the surrender, the inquiry, and the service. And then when the spiritual master sees this nice qualification of the disciple, and he pours out the knowledge is given freely, and it's absorbed. We were hearing today about the Bhakti Lata Bij. There's a little confusion between the Bija and the Lata. There's a seed that's planted for the fortunate soul. Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev. The word is Bhagyavan Jeev. Guru Krishna Prasarai Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Now we've all had that Bij planted, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. The Bij is, what this verse says is that all the millions of trillions of countless living entities who are wandering, Brahmate, what is it? Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev. Now my mind is drawing a blank. Brahmanda Brahmite. Brahmanda, you know what the Brahmanda is? You know where that word comes from? Okay, Anda is an egg, and Brahma is Brahma. His universe, he's like the big wheel in the universe, right? And so it's like an egg because there's a little opening in the middle, and there's a big shell in the form of earth and water, fire, air, ether, each 10 times bigger. So there's a little space in the middle, and there's a big shell made of all these elements. So there's millions and millions of these, and each one has its own Brahma. So it's called Brahmanda, the Brahma's egg, Brahma's universe. Brahmanda Brahmite. Brahmite means to wander. And we've been wandering up and down this particular universe, who knows how long. Right, up to higher planets, down to lower planets, higher species, lower species. So that's the soul. Brahmanda Brahmate Bhagyavan Jiva, the fortunate Jiva. Guru Krishna Pasare Pai. By the mercy of Guru and Krishna. Now, I was just working on one passage in my editing work where Prabhupada makes it clear, first comes the mercy of the Guru, then you get the mercy of Krishna. So this is the order, very important. So by the mercy of Guru, you get Krishna. By the mercy of Krishna, you get Guru. And by the mercy of both of them, you get the Bhakti Lata Bija. Now this is a metaphor. This is a metaphor for the planting of the seed of the creeper of devotion. Means that the impartation comes through the ear by hearing and associating. Or Vijay was talking, through the books. It's a type of hearing, reading. It's not as potent as actual hearing, but it's practical. And so, what does it consist of? I pointed it out to Vijay Prabhu after the class, because I looked up that passage. This is the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami, 19th chapter, Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Prabhupada, it's a very important passage. So it consists of the knowledge of the ways and the means and the practices of devotional service and the philosophy, everything that we receive to nourish our faith and give us instruction of what to do to realize all of this knowledge. Just the knowledge alone is not going to help us. We have to also have the practice where we become purified, and the knowledge means more and more to us, and we realize the knowledge. It's the difference between Dhyan and Vigyan. Dhyan is book knowledge, more or less, very important. But Vigyan means you actually realize. Scientific knowledge, probably would call it. So this is planted. Every devotee who's practicing devotional service seriously, takes it up, has had this seed planted. And then comes the process of watering. Now it's best done in association. It's important because Maya is so powerful and we're so conditioned. So this association helps us, to nicely water that creeper so it grows nicely, and to pull out the weeds, the material desires, the anarthas, the abhadras, all of the things in our heart that are blockages to our devotion. So here Prabhupada Krishna is giving this essential step here, where the spiritual master, who is Tattvadarshi, someone who has directly seen Vigyan. In other words, he's giving all kinds of knowledge from the books and everything, but he's also experienced it, realized. That gives him a potency that otherwise isn't there. That's why it's so important to come in touch with the pure devotee. And the best way for us practically on a daily basis is through the books of Prabhupada. And when we follow the instructions that he laid down, getting up early, doing all the things we knew, that's also contact with him. We shouldn't think that he's gone, He's also watching over us. It's a super soul, and it's all working like that to help us. So that's watering that Bhakti Lata Bija till it sprouts, and then there's the Bhakti Lata. Lata means the creeper or vine. The vine. And what Vijay didn't end up describing is that, so you're watering this Bhakti Lata with hearing and chanting primarily, and you're careful to avoid the offenses, so you're uprooting the weeds, and so it's flourishing nicely. So Lord Chaitanya describes eventually it penetrates the coverings of the universe, and it finds Krishna's lotus feet, and then produces the fruit of prema pal, which you can taste forever. That's the metaphor. It's a very wonderful analogy. So the similar thing is being described here, is that the fruit of the surrender to the spiritual master and being imparted, the knowledge being imparted, he's giving the seed of bhakti now, is that knowing this and getting this knowledge, he says in the verse we just read, one will not fall again into illusion. In other words, if you follow it nice, then you'll be immune to Maya. As we find that in the 7th chapter. Daiviyesha gunamaye mama maya doratyaya. That this divine energy of mine, called Maya, is my Maya. And it's impossible to get over it, to conquer it on your own. Duratya means difficult to overcome, basically impossible. But mameve prapadyante mayame tang tarantite. One who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. Because after all, Maya, she has a thankless task, but she's still a servant of Krishna, of keeping the illusion, living entities bound in illusion and suffering. She's imparting that suffering. But it's all a reformatory. It's not just eternal damnation. There's nothing like that in even though these hells that go on for millions of years, you get out of it eventually and you come back up, you get another chance. So, tarantite. So, in other words, she withdraws. You become able to withstand Maya's illusions, both her allurements for enjoyment and the punishments that you get. That from your previous karma, you're able to be tolerant of that, and do it because you're serving Krishna, and you're getting only a fraction. This is how the devotees are meant to feel. Oh, whatever I suffer is minimized by Krishna. How kind He is, and whatever is good is also given to me by Krishna. So increase my service. Krishna's given me a chance to serve. So in both ways, whether it's some difficulty you face, or some good thing happens because of karma's coming or whatever, the mood, the attitude toward Krishna remains positive. Otherwise, you risk becoming an atheist. The famous Prabhupada would tell the story about the ladies in Germany during the war or after the war. It's such a horrific scene. It's just hard to imagine how horrible it was. All their brothers and their their husbands, sons, fathers, they all went off to war. So naturally, they're going everybody to church, probably Lutheran church, praying, please send them back, and protect them, And many of them didn't come back. If they came back, they were crippled, and so many of them lost faith from that. They weren't following Tate Nukampam Susamikshimana. So it's a test. I was just hearing a lecture today, Kunti's prayers. There's this famous prayer, Vipadaksanta Takshaswad Tattva Tattva Jagad Guru Bhavatu Darshanam Yaksyat Apanar Bhavadarshanam. The word Vipada means danger. Padam Padam Yad Vipadam Natesham is the famous verse that ends in that. So she's recounting all the difficulties that she went through with her sons, the Pandavas. The house of lac was set on fire. They had to run into the forest. They were incognito. They had no army or anything. So they escaped, but they didn't have anything. So she's suffering along with them. She's sleeping on the cold ground, and so many dangers. And the war itself was a big danger, horrible. The Brahmastra was thrown. So after recounting all these, she says, let them happen again and again. Universal Guru. Let these dangers and let these sufferings happen again, because by them we see you again and again. And by seeing you, we won't have to see birth and death anymore. In other words, when a devotee is in danger and he's fully surrendered to Krishna, there's no other shelter. So you call out to him with ardent, feeling, and that pertains, to the marathon, to undergoing any difficulty for Krishna. This is what he really appreciates more than anything, as he says in the Gita at the end. To take trouble to try to give him to others, to try to reclaim some of all the countless conditioned souls who are suffering in this world. So, but in doing that, then there's so much shelter you have to take, because there's dangers, there's helplessness, there's a feeling of inadequacy, so many things you have to overcome. So that's it's very quickly purifying. So here, the verse we read now, once knowing this, once getting this knowledge, genuine knowledge from the Tattvadarshi, what's the result? Naponu moham, you won't fall into illusion again. In other words, if you really get vigyan, realize knowledge, you'll be enlightened. You won't fall into illusion. Yena bhutanya sheshani druksha. You will see that all living beings are in me, or in other words, they're mine. In other words, you'll see the relationship of every living being and in everything, and even inanimate things, to Krishna. That's Krishna consciousness, where you never, everything reminds you of Krishna. Which is related to Krishna. Our separate mentality, there's this separatist mentality, means we try to separate Krishna's energy from Krishna so we can enjoy it. But that's called Maya. That mentality keeps us bound in this world. We can enjoy it, we can try to exploit it for some time, but then we get caught in the web and we take birth again. So here he says, you will not again fall into illusion if you're actually taking advantage of this spiritual master. All right, let's go through some of the points of the purport. Exactly, that part. You learn that all living beings are parts and parcels of Krishna. The sense of separateness is Maya. That's what doesn't exist. That's illusion. Some think we have nothing to do with Krishna. He's only the greatest outer figure. This is all Maya. Okay. All of the different other elements of the absolute truth, Brahman and Super Soul, they're all simply part of Krishna's glory. That's the idea. Clearly that Krishna is the Supreme God, is the cause of all causes. You know that, you picked up Ishvarak Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadirari Govinda. That's what he's speaking. Sarva Karana Karanam, the cause of all causes. When you look into this world, you just contemplate this world, you see that everything is an effect of a whole series of causes. Like this building we're sitting in. Where did it come from? Well, one of the places it came from was an idea. Somebody had an idea. Let's build a building to make some money, whatever it was, a warehouse or theater, whatever it was. So that was the start of it. And now, where did that idea come from? The intelligence comes from Krishna, so you can always take it back to Krishna. But you can trace it. So what happened then? So he needed I'm just guessing now. He needed an investor, so he had to find someone who was saying, "Yeah, that's a good idea. We can make some money. So I'll invest in this building, and you hire your crew, and drawing up the blueprints, and all this stuff." So then there's all the workers. They're also part of the cause. Without them, there'd be no building. And the raw materials, the cement and the paint and the wiring and everything else that goes into a building, that's part of the cause, But when you take all of those causes back, where did the cement come from? Where did the stone come from? It all goes back to Krishna. The very intelligence, the muscles, the everything. So Krishna's the cause of all the causes of everything that we see. And that's another way of seeing Krishna in everything. Seeing. You walk outside. I'm taking this walk every day. And what am I looking at? A lot of it, most of it is artificial. It's made. The roads and the sidewalk and all these expensive houses on either side. Well, if you're Krishna conscious, you can see. Yeah, all of them are just an aggregate of causes. And that ultimately trace back to Krishna. So that in that way you can see Krishna in everything. But the way it really works is to stay in that vision is to have the mentality of being a servant. Sarvapadi vinimuktam tatpadat veda nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakta uchite. This is another definition of bhakti. It's right near the famous verse on the Bilashidasranya. So this idea of upadis. Upadi is a designation that we place on ourselves. It's illusory. I am this body. That means, I'm a certain age, I'm a certain, nationality, whatever's on your driver's license or your passport, your age. So these are all upadis. So you have to be free of them. You can't identify yourself as that, some kind of bodily designation. Tatparatveena nirmalam. Nirmalam means completely pure of that. And with your senses, your every act is serving the master of the senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Rishika Isha. Isha means the Lord. It's short for Ishvara. And Rishika is a word for senses. So a name for Krishna is Rishikesh. It's actually one of the names in the Gita, the master of the senses. Rishikena means with your senses, instrumental. With our senses, we're serving the master of the senses. Otherwise, with our senses, we're trying to serve our sense gratification. That's the illusion. And that just leads to suffering, because it means we're on the bodily concept, So, so the whole thing is people are ignorant, and out of this ignorance they inevitably become illusioned, and they believing a fantasy world. Just like today, as you may be aware, there's all kinds of theories and conspiracy theories and illusory so-called realities that people have gotten into because of their exposure on the internet mostly. You can make up something, and if you present it right, it's all in the presentation. How you put it out, you can get a following before you know it. You've got a whole cult going. People will believe anything. I remember there was a shocking cult. You may, if you guys weren't around, this is like at least 20 years ago. I mean, you were around, but you weren't even around. But you were 4 years old, whatever. But right here in SanDiego, there was something. What was it called? Huh? Yeah, Heaven's Gate. You've read about it. And suddenly, we're driving back on Grand Avenue. I forget where I'm coming, and we hear the news. I forget how I heard it. Whoa! All these people. Some cult leader, he got it in his head. He was nuts, and that the alien ship is waiting for us. We can go join him. I forget all the details of it, but people got into it and they committed suicide. It was like 34 people or something, right up here, And then, and even more shocking. This you definitely don't know about, or you may have heard about it. Jim Jones. You heard of Jim Jones? Oh my God. That was just after, I'm practically on the plane when I read the story in Time magazine. I was going from LA to Atlanta to work with the BI. And there's this cult, some American guy, he took all his people down to Guyana, I think it was. 900 people committed suicide. They took the Kool-Aid. That's how that whole thing, you drank the Kool-Aid, you're drinking the Kool-Aid. It's become like a metaphor for getting into it crazy. So what is that? That means that it's a, in one sense it's a symptom, or it's a special case of what everyone is in, because everyone is in a crazy cult, thinking that I'm the body, thinking that I can live forever, think that there's no life after death, or God is this, God is that. People live that. They go on for hundreds of years that way, generations. So ignorance is the source of all this suffering. Ignorance of really what's what, who, what our mission in life is, who we really are, that we're spirit souls, and certainly ignorance of Krishna. So that's why this whole chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge, and here he said Yagyatva, understanding from the Tattvadarshi, one who's actually seen the truth, the science of Krishna, then you'll be able to get free of the illusion and ultimately bondage. That's in the next verse. Because we're bound up by all the sinful activities we performed out of ignorance, on the basis of this false sense of self and everything else. Okay, shall we go on? Apichet asipapebhya sarvebhyak papakrittamaha sarvam jnana pravenaiva vijinam santarishyasi. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. Purport. Proper understanding of one's constitutional position in relationship to Krishna is so nice that it can at once lift one from the struggle for existence which goes on in the ocean of nescience. Wow. This material world is sometimes regarded as an ocean of nescience and sometimes as a blazing forest. I see blazing forest, fire. It should be, I think. In the ocean, however expert a swimmer one may be, the struggle for existence is very severe. If someone comes forward and lifts the struggling swimmer from the ocean, he is the greatest savior. Perfect knowledge received from the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the path of liberation. The boat of Krishna consciousness is very simple, but at the same time, the most sublime. So this is something that people don't realize. This is part of the deep well of ignorance, is that you may have a slight amount of freedom, of independence to act as you want. in this life. You can go to McDonald's, or you can go get some, prasadam. You're free. But you're not free from the reactions when you do sinful activity. You don't know. You're ignorant. Again, the ignorance produces sin, and sin produces suffering. So, I live right across from McDonald's, and sometimes I go out on my little porch and I'm chanting around and I'm watching, they're lining up, and they're just people. It's the most natural thing in the world. They get up to the menu thing and they see what they want. They call out, I think they tell them what they want, and they go around. And it's just like the most convenient thing, But every time they do that, they're incurring so much sin that's going to have to pay for that. When you actually realize what's going on, then you become more aware of the importance of what you do and why you do it, and your activities. And it's such a boon, such a blessing to know that God, all those things I did, but I'm practicing Krishna consciousness now, all the chanting, and I'm getting free from all those sinful reactions. This is an important understanding, because as I've often mentioned, there's these two main motivations for being Krishna conscious. That people that one is mostly to get peace and get free from the suffering, immediate suffering, or if you're a little knowledgeable, future suffering from birth, death, old age, and disease, and suffering, sinful reactions. That's fine. That's an important motivation. Janma mitra jada vyadi dukkha doshana darshanam, Krishna says. And that's what's being spoken here. Papebhya sarvebhya papakritama. Even if you're full of sin, you're the greatest of sinners, you've done every sin in the world, if you're on this boat of real knowledge, then vrijinam santarishyasi, you will cross the ocean of miseries. So, as I mentioned throughout this chapter, real knowledge means acting according to the knowledge. Because if you find some knowledge and you say, "Oh, I should do this," and then I'll be benefited, but you don't do it, then the knowledge will fade. You'll be acting on some other perception. What is the good? The good is sense gratification. Then all of this other stuff will become theoretical. But if you actually accept the knowledge and you mold your life according to it, then you're actually experiencing the benefit. And you can stay on that boat. And you can even feel yourself, being freed from sinful reactions. You can feel the weight of karma, being lifted. So that's what Krishna is, this famous boat. There's so many boats. And I like to quote that verse. I think I mentioned this, how I memorized this verse many years ago and then forgot it. And fairly recently, one devotee in Columbus, he's a young kid and he likes slokas, and he mentioned this verse to me. He said, "Oh, thanks a lot for reminding me." There's a chapter in the 12th canto all about different annihilations. I think I mentioned to it, the universe of Brahma's annihilation, and it's a big annihilation when the whole universe is destroyed. Everything goes back within Mahavishnu. There's our own personal annihilation when we die. So it's a fairly sobering chapter. And then at the end of the chapter, he has this verse says, "There's only one boat to take you over this ocean of suffering." Let's see if I can remember it now. Samsara sindhum, the ocean of samsara. Every morning we sing samsara davanali. That's the other analogy, the forest fire. Samsara sindhamati dushtanamurti teshur nanak plavak bhagavato purushoktamasya lila katavata nisevinnamantarena pungso bhaved vivata dukkha davardi tasya. Dava is the fire. So in this verse, both of them are there. So he says, for those who are very, very eager and determined to cross over the ocean of suffering, known as samsara, samsara sindham, ati dustadam, which is very difficult to cross over. But you're utti tirshur, you're very determined to cross over it. There's no other boat. There's no other boat. But the cultivation of the taste for hearing Krishna Katha, dealing with the pastimes of Krishna. Lila Katha, rasa nishevanam, serving that rasa or developing the rasa. For who? Pungso bhaved, for the person, bhaved vivada dukkha davardi tasya, who's suffering the varied miseries of being in the fire of this material world. Davardi tasya. So that's what we're trying to do. This is part of Krishna's Leela, speaking the Bhagavad Gita. The knowledge is there. but as well, Krishna book. Prabhupada spent so much time giving us Krishna books, so we'll have Krishna's actual pastimes. We spent that whole month of Damodar every morning singing, Iti drikswa lila birana nukunde. With these pastimes, he drowned the residents of Vrindavan in oceans of Ananda. That Ananda, even if we can just taste a tiny drop of it, will help negate our attraction for the material energy. And we'll see the counter indication, if you will, for a sense gratification. That it simply entraps you and gives you this false idea that there's happiness in that direction. And the more that we go in that direction, the less interested we become in Krishna consciousness. We should always remember, we fell from the spiritual world. So, one may ask, well, my God, how did I do that? Wasn't I in bliss, But Krishna will withdraw that. If you're really determined to explore the material energy, and you'll get absorbed in the material world, and you forget all about the spiritual world. And I've seen it, hundreds of times. Unfortunately, over the years, my almost 50 years now, where devotees can just lose that devotional mood through offenses and slackness in their sadhana, and all of Krishna consciousness seems like a dream. It seems like something that I did when I was 24 and 25, but now I'm very much serious about life. It's hard. In our present state, maybe to understand that, but that can easily happen. So we have to be very vigilant, and don't play around with Maya. She's very powerful. All right, let's read one or two more. So now he gets some nice another analogy here. Yatai dangsi samidhognir. Let's try it again. Alex, you ready? Yatai dangsi samidhognir. Basmasat kuruterjuna. Jnanagni sarva karmani. Basmasat kurute tata. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. Purport. Perfect knowledge of self and super-self and of their relationship is compared herein to fire. This fire not only burns up all reactions to impious activities, but also all reactions to pious activities, turning them to ashes. There are many stages of reaction. Reaction in the making, reaction fructifying, reaction already achieved, and reaction a priori. But knowledge of the constitutional position of the living entity burns everything to ashes. When one is in complete knowledge, all reactions, both a priori and a posteriori, are consumed. In the Vedas, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.4.22, it is stated, Ubhe uhai vaisha ete tadat yamrita sad sadhuni. One overcomes both the pious and the impious reactions of work. So there's a famous verse in the Brahma Samhita, and poetically describes this. Yastvindra gopam atavendra maho swakarma bandhanurupa palabhajanam atanoti karmani nirdahati kintata bhakti bhajam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajan. You know that one? No. So he says, Yastvindra Indra gopam. So Indra gopam is a little germ, So from Indra himself down to the little Indra gopa. Atavendram, Atava Indra, in a whole, how wonderful. Swakarma bandhana rupa. They're all bound by the reactions of their karma. They're all working out their karma. Pala, and experiencing the fruits, both painful and pleasurable. Bhajana matanoti. Bhajana means experiencing them. But karmani nirdahati kintuta bhakti bhajam. For those who are practicing serious devotional service to Govinda, who I worship, who is the primeval Lord, he burns to ashes. Karmani nirdahati. Nirdahati means completely burning. All of these reactions for the sincere devotee. So that's such a blessing. We don't even know. We're not aware of that. But we're all like bound up by all this karma. And we're running, going through life. And without Krishna consciousness, we really, we have a little leeway. We can act this way or that way. But the example is given, you're on a plane, you get on an airplane. You know? Well, your main karma is you're going to your destination. You know, you're going to go from LA to Chicago, from SanDiego to Chicago or whatever. But you have some leeway. You know, you can stand up and walk around a little bit, go to the bathroom. You can choose to eat the in-flight meal or not, you know, and this and that. You can read this, read that, listen to this, listen to that. But your main thing, you're going to Chicago. So that's how, in human life you have a little bit of freedom, you know. But you're bound up by that karma. That's the main thing that's happening to you. And without any knowledge, which will guide your activity properly, then you're going to be incurring all kinds of new karma. And in this world where, you know, anything goes, you know, there's no the chances are you're going to perform all kinds of big karma and get extreme suffering. You know, in my lifetime, just by living and, you know, actually looking at material life from the outside, more or less, you know, there's so many aspects of material life that are great examples to teach us, to teach us. And I always am amazed about how, like, the drug culture is a perfect metaphor for material life in general, because you know, it's so self-destructive, but you don't really, you know, the drugs, recreational drugs, because a lot of people are now kind of self-medicating just like to get through, and that can also be horrific, the opioids and everything, you know. But it's just go to the recreational drugs. All right, so, you know, you're partying, this and that, and you know, this drug comes around, that drug comes around, and it's just part of the scene. There's so much peer pressure, you know, and you want to do it, you know, like, and so you get into it. And there's some high, there's something, you know, there's some pleasure there. You're not doing it to suffer, you're doing it to enjoy, you know. So that's what's going on. You don't have any other knowledge, you don't have anywhere else to stand. You're really victimized by that atmosphere, because, you know, that's who your friends are. So then you get hooked on something. And today, God, I read how, you know, in my day, we're talking the 60s, the marijuana was a whole different species. It just was not as heavy and as all-encompassing as they have today. So it's anyway. And the other drugs weren't even around, luckily, where I was. Anyway, you know, I mean, it was just coming in, all the cocaine and everything, and luckily I avoided all that. But here's an innocent person, young person coming up, and you know, his friends get into some other friends, and before you know it, you're associating with, and then something's available, and then you're into this culture where you're taking some heavy drug like cocaine or something, and you get hooked on it, and it's doing damage. Every time you do it, it does damage to your nervous system, to your brain, you know. And so you become one of the casualties, one of the, you know, thousands and millions of casualties. Sometimes I was reading now, you know, the deaths of despair. You probably heard about that, you know, because there's so much trouble, you know, economically, and now you got the pandemic and all these things. So it's very common people overdose, and now even unintentionally. Okay, I'll just do the pills, you know, because I don't want to get into all this other thing. But the pills now they're making with fentanyl, which is like 100 times more powerful than heroin, you know. And you take the pill, and boom, you're dead. If it's not properly mixed or something, you know. So it's a metaphor for material life in general. Because we come into this world, you're trying to enjoy. And you enjoy like crazy. You know, you're Lord Brahma, you know. This is the Brahma explains in ninth canto. Not every Brahma goes back to Godhead, you know. The Brahmas come down and they come, you know, down to this level or below. So the whole idea is there's a whole field for you to enjoy, and you're actually maybe doing it according to certain rules and regulations, you know. But the very mood of enjoyment is degrading, and it steals away your knowledge. This is the lesson of the last chapter. You remember how lust covers your knowledge. So engagement in sense gratification covers your knowledge. So that's why knowledge here implies proper activity. If you're not acting according to the knowledge, you lose the knowledge. You can't hold the knowledge of, you know, of what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and in any kind of acuity, and at the same time violate that knowledge. It doesn't work that way. You forget that, and you'll be operating according to some other paradigm. You see? So that's why when he says the fire, knowledge burns to ashes or reacts in material activities, that means you're following the process that's taught by the knowledge. It's not some theoretical thing. That's the thing about Prabhupada's books. They're a challenge to anybody. It's not just some books of philosophy that you can read and put aside. It's challenging you to change your life, And if you follow it, then it becomes like a great treasure to you, a guide. You can go back to and get inspired. It's never dry. It's ever fresh. There's always something new to understand here. So this is we should want that knowledge, and that means cultivating knowledge in Prabhupada's books, sharing it, giving it, and Krishna gives from within. That's why it is said the chanting. Remember, Vidyavadu Jivanam. This Harinam Sankirtan is also the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. What does that mean? It means that the knowledge actually comes automatically. So like Haridas Thakur, he wasn't studying. He knew all that. And Gaura Das Babaji, they were great scholars, even though they would hear, and Krishna would tell from within. So that knowledge comes, and at the same time you become so fascinated and interested in the knowledge in the books. That interest and that eagerness to learn is a blessing from Krishna, and we should follow that and increase it as much as possible. So that's why the Sankirtan, the chanting, is also the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. You from within, Krishna is enlightening, and at the same time he's giving you the taste to hear. To drink it in. So we've been given so much. It's amazing, and the books are constantly expanding, because the very act of writing about Krishna is so enlivening that there's always books coming out. Our devotees are writing books. We have Guru Swami's great books hopefully appear soon. On the Bombay adventure. So that's all coming out, and the more we have a taste for this knowledge, the more we know that we're on the safe side. Krishna is blessing us. Okay, any final questions? We will resume tomorrow night with text 38. And we're getting to the end of this chapter. But now, just to end with something sweet. Where is my marker? Here it is. All right. So, how about the Chataka bird? You remember the Chataka bird praying to the cloud? Vidachahimai dandam dina bando dayangva gatadihina bhavatta kachadanya mamasti. Niputata shatakoti nirmalang vanavambas tadapakila payorak stuyate chatakena. The Chataka subsists on rain it catches in midair, and so it's always praying to the cloud to send its fare. Yet though that cloud may send a thunderbolt instead of rain, that bird continues praying fervently despite the pain. Just like the Chataka, I fix my mind upon one goal, and that is you, O Lord, most kind to every fallen soul. So whether it is punishment you send, or mercy sweet, I'll always pray to you for service to your lotus feet. It's a lot in that one prayer. All right, we have time for one more. Bhujanga Dupachandaka, Spuradakunda Chudankure, you know this one. Nirankasha Dirganchala, Brahmina Buddha Bringa Brahme, Patanga Duhitustati, Varnakuti Rakedi Priye, Padaspudutume Mahostrai Mukunda Shuddharati. You wear the best of crests, a crown of perfect peacock plumes. Your dancing glances stun the bees meandering midst the blooms. You relish love play in a cottage by Kalindi shore. O Krishna, may pure love for you be mine forevermore. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.